Fight fans, welcome to the PBC podcast, brought to you by Premier Boxing Champions with your host, Kenneth Buhari and Michael Rosenthal.
Welcome everyone to the PBC podcast. I'm Kenneth Buhari.
And I'm Michael Rosenthal, editor of USA Today's Boxing Junkie.
Thank you all for tuning in this week. We've got the renowned Derrick James joining us. Plus, we're going to look back at last weekend's action. And on toe-to-toe, Mike and I will unveil our top 10 pound-for-pound list. You don't want to miss that. But first, some bad news. Undefeated WBC middleweight world champion Jermall Charlo suffered a back injury during training, and his June 18th bout versus Maciej Zuliski has been postponed. The entire card has been postponed. A new date is currently being worked on depending on when Jermall can return to training. We'll provide an update as we receive them, but for now, let's move on to the week in review. Last Saturday, Premier Boxing Champions presented a double-header on Showtime from the Armory in Minneapolis. In the main event, undefeated Stephen Fulton Jr. successfully defended his WBC and WBO 122-pound world titles, winning a 12-round unanimous decision over former unified champ Danny Roman. Fulton pitched a shutout on two cards and won 11 rounds on the third. Mike, was that in line with what you saw as far as the fight?
Yeah, pretty much. The fight itself was what I thought it might be, a tactical fight between two really good boxers. I just thought it was going to be a little bit closer than that.
Yeah.
And I said last week that Fulton was just a little bit better than Roman across the board. Turned out he was a lot better across the board, which was reflected in the scoring of the fight, which you just mentioned. Yeah, I gave one round to Roman, but it easily could have been a shutout.
Yeah, it could have. I mean, I thought it was very, very dominant display. What did you make of Fulton's performance?
Excellent performance, particularly because of the respect I have for Roman,
Yes.
who's a really good boxer. I mean, Fulton just dominated that fight. He outboxed him, and he outlanded Roman 2-1, and again across the board in jabs, power punches, and overall, according to CompuBox. And Roman landed only 17% of his punches overall, which is a low number. It was just a master class from Fulton. Roman just couldn't get anything done in the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I was very impressed with Fulton. This was more in line with what I saw when he fought Angelo Leo, where I was blown away by his performance. When he fought Brendan Figueroa, I thought he didn't look like the guy who fought Leo, although that partially was due to Figueroa, but also prior to the fight with Roman, Fulton mentioned that he was gonna be better, that he didn't cut the weight properly for the Figueroa fight, and man, did he look splendid. Is Fulton even better than what we thought?
I don't know. That's kind of hard to say. I think that the fights that you mentioned, I think those style matchups were just, every style matchup this is no revelation, but every style matchup is a little bit different. Leo and Figueroa are more pressure fighters, and Figueroa is a bigger, stronger, better pressure fighter than Angelo Leo, which I think was the main reason that Fulton had problems in that fight. Well, Roman is a better matchup. It was boxer against boxer, and Fulton was just better. Yeah, I thought. Let's put it this way: I thought Fulton might have been at his best in this fight. I don't think I've ever seen him better than he was in this fight, which is saying something because he's looked good in a lot of fights. My only question about him is the same one I have about Shakur Stevenson and Devin Haney, and that's his power. But I'm not sure that's going to matter in the end. I don't see anybody at his weight class beating this guy.
Yeah, and I think he has more power than we realize. He doesn't really sit on his punches, but when he started sitting on his punches against Roman in the late rounds, he was starting to put a hurt on him a little bit. And I also think the common thread with all the fights we're discussing is that Fulton won all of them. It just goes to show how excellent
the winners do.
Right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Where does Roman go from here?
That's a tough one. That was a bad loss, the kind of loss that changes how people look at you a little bit. But he can say, hey, I was in with a really special fighter, which he was. That's true. But that's the kind of guy you have to beat to get to the top of the heap. That said, Roman is a good fighter, and he's not going anywhere. I see him fighting maybe a lower level contender next and working his way back up. But I think he's a really good fighter, and I think he's going to have some more success going forward.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with you. I don't think, look, I just think he ran into something special
Yep.
on a Saturday night. Who would you like to see Fulton face next?
Well, the guy he wants to fight next,
Oh, yeah.
Birjan Akhmadaliev, who holds the other two 122-pound titles. Fulton wants to become undisputed and then probably move up to 126, I guess. How does Fulton do in that fight? Akhmadaliev is good, but as I said, I don't see anybody at 122 or maybe even 126 beating Fulton, with the possible exception of Gary Russell Jr., which would be a hell of a fight.
Yeah, that would be a hell of a fight. Maybe that's something we'll be discussing in another year or so, maybe even less time. But I'm with you. I think he should fight MJ next. I want to see Undisputed, and I think Fulton deserves it. I just can't see anyone beating him at 122, like you said. Now, in the co-feature, unbeaten super middleweight sensation David Morrell Jr. stopped Calvin Henderson inside 4 rounds. Henderson was game. But, I mean, Morrell was just too much for him, battering him from the opening bell until the fight was stopped. Did we learn anything about Morrell in this fight?
I wasn't quite sure how to answer. I'm not really quite sure how to answer that, other than to say that I think he's still developing. I think I know why he came out so aggressively from the opening bell. He wanted to say, with a spectacular victory, "Hey, I'm here. You can't ignore me." I think he's sort of in that mode, and he was successful. Henderson couldn't get out of the 4th round, so obviously Morrell did something right. I just think it was really risky the way he fought. The one thing that Henderson has is punching power. That could have been a disaster for Morrell. Morrell has knocked out people patiently, taking his time. I'd go that route if I were him. And something else crossed my mind. Imagine if he was that aggressive against a guy like David Benavidez.
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the fans certainly wouldn't complain. If he fought David Benavidez, let's say right now, or in his next fight, in your opinion, who wins?
I'm not going to pick against Benavidez at that weight unless he fights Canelo Alvarez. And even then, I'd think long and hard about it. I like Morrell a lot. He has that amateur experience, a ton of ability, and he's got power to boot. But again, I think he's still evolving. Benavidez is a big, strong, better than people realize, all around boxer, has already been there at that level for quite a long time in spite of his age. I think that would be biting off more than Morrell could chew right now, but he's got a ton of talent. So honestly, I wouldn't put anything past him.
Yeah. In fact, it's an interesting, a compelling fight now. Speaks volumes. Who would you like to see Morrell face next?
If I were advising him, I would probably suggest he fight a few more Calvin Hendersons, but I think he's ready for a top 15, maybe a top 10 guy. Maybe we've talked about this in the past, but I think an Anthony Durrell, although that'd be a hard fight. It'd be a really hard fight for him. It'd be a hard fight for anybody. Let's face it. Maybe this crossed my mind. Maybe one of the good British guys, that at that weight. I think he needs to face and beat a guy like that before we can say for sure that this guy's the real deal. But I think that's coming. It's coming soon, within the next 2 or 3 fights.
I was thinking like a Caleb Truax came to mind.
That's a good idea. Love that.
He's a good opponent and a good barometer. Would certainly test him. But hey, no question, Morrell isn't too far off. One note, in our prediction league, Mike and I are both tied, 26 wins, 6 losses, 1 draw. And it is time to bring in our guest this week. He is the clear front runner for 2022 Trainer of the Year, and probably should have won it a few other times by now because the brother is just that good. The head trainer for unified welterweight champion Errol Spence Jr. and undisputed 154-pound champion Jermell Charlo, not to mention the undefeated rising lightweight Frank Martin, Texas's own Derrick James. Derrick, first things first, congratulations on your role in Errol Spence and Jermell Charlo's recent high-profile victories.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
It's, I think now it's a consensus view that you've reached the pinnacle as perhaps the top trainer in the game at the moment. Have you had time to reflect on what you've accomplished so far?
I've thought about it, but I don't dwell on it. And I feel like you just can't. You can think about it and keep it moving because only way you keep that space is to not stay in the space that you want a title at. So I think I have to keep moving, keep trying to be better, and just keep getting my guys prepared. I mean, you know, as you see, they're getting bigger and better fights, and they're looking better in the fights that they're fighting. So it's like I can't dwell on my success, because if you dwell on it, you lose it. So it's about attaining it and keeping it moving.
Derrick, is there a secret to your success, or will you not tell me because it's a secret?
No, man, it's just I think that I'm just I'm in tune with my guys, and I think that I just won't take no, or not necessarily no, but like I just won't stop until I feel like they get what I think they need. And so that's it. I'm just saying I have a never die attitude towards my guys, where in preparation, I'm working, and I'm just pushing them, and doing myself to push myself to be better.
You sort of alluded to this earlier. How do you stay motivated? Is it just love of the game?
I mean, no, it's just I feel like that I'm gonna say it like this. I love to be able to be there for my guys and whatever they need. So it's so much about doing the job that I'm hired for, or hired to do. That's really what a large part of the motivation is, just to consistently be consistent with what they need for me.
Now, the fight everyone is hoping for, obviously, is Errol Spence versus Terrence Crawford. From your trainer's eye, why do you regard Crawford as a worthy challenge for Errol? What makes him a good fighter?
Well, I think that he's his skill set. I think that is speed, athleticism. I think at the same time, his level of success that he's attained, moving from lightweight to being undisputed at 140 and moving up to 147. So I think that he is I think it'll be a great fight.
What advantages do you think do you believe Errol has over Crawford that will allow him to win that fight?
I won't get into that. I'll just say that I feel like it's all about me and my guy. That's what I never bet against myself, so that I wouldn't be here today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like it's all about me and my guy, and I won't go in and talk about what advantages we have, but I think they seem to think they have so many more advantages, so I just let them have that. Enjoy that until you find out the truth.
The truth.
Very good. Jermell Charlo is coming off his impressive victory over Brian Castano in their rematch. He seems to finally be getting the universal recognition that he deserves. Are you thinking, well, it's about time that he gets that recognition?
Well, I think that they were watching him, right? Because if you think about like our first 7 fights or 8 fights, he had all knockouts. The first 7 fights are all knockouts. So I don't know what it was that would hold him back from embracing him, right? But then with the decisive victory over Brian Castano shows just really who he really is as a fighter. And it's great because he showed the world that, the first fight was what it was, and this fight was a whole lot better.
Yeah, it was. What did he do in the rematch that resulted in the different outcome?
He listened. He listened. And
that's what he said at the post-fight interview, right? He said, "I listened."
Hey, listen. Because it's like there's no interference. It's just he and I. And that's really what it was, just the focus, and he was able to listen. And we set a great strategy for him. And he went out there and he capitalized on it, and he was able to do it. So it was great.
Now, he's undisputed champion now, which, sometimes can mean that it's time to move up. How long do you think he stays at 154?
Oh, that I don't know. We haven't had that discussion. It's just like I think that he stays there for as long as he wants, and then, hey, we'll see how everything goes.
Yeah, he seemed to make the weight pretty easy. He was like a little bit over 152 pounds, right? When he
right, yeah, just a little bit over, yeah.
No, there's so many. I mean, Jamal's run through so many different eras, I feel like, at 154, but there's still a lot of young fighters in the division. Who do you think are the best young guys coming up at 154 right now?
I don't watch a lot of boxing, but I do. I've heard like this Fanfara. I think he's a pretty tough guy. That his name? The big tall
Fundora.
kid?
Fundura.
So,
Yeah.
Fundora. I think Fundora is a great fighter. I think that he's a great fighter. I mean, the other guys, I think that they have yet to show me something that, because even got Tim Tszyu. I think he's a good fighter, but I think that, I mean, you really don't really know what he has. And I haven't looked at him. I haven't watched him only but the one time when he fought
Terrell Gaucher.
Terrell Gaucher, yeah. So other than that, I haven't seen him fight. There's a lot of good guys out there. I mean, Tony Ashland's still lurking.
Yeah.
There's a lot of guys out there. I mean, there's a lot of good fighters out there. I think Danny Garcia's moved up.
Right.
So, there's a lot of good guys out there.
There you go.
Stay focused on who we are and constantly keep getting better.
Switching gears, Frank Martin, a fighter you train, is a sensational-looking lightweight. How are things looking for him? And tell us, what do you think makes Frank such a good fighter?
I think Frank's a great fighter because he has the amazing athleticism, and for me to come in and kind of tweak it a little bit and give him more of a boxing set, skill set, and like more intellect, it's like he's and he's in the gym with the guys, so he's seeing greatness. I mean, so it may be a pressure field situation, or it may just be goes to school every day. I mean, he goes to school every day and watch the best fight in the world, training in the gym. So I think it's great.
How far along is he? Is he close to being ready for the top guys at 35, or is he ready now for the top guys at 35?
I think he's ready now, but I think that at the same time we'll constantly keep just building in and constantly keep developing and working with him on the skill set. And maybe like within the next year after, he'll be ready for something really big.
You mentioned I know you don't really watch these guys until it's time for you to watch these guys, but
right.
We've had some truly special performances the past few weeks. Gervonta Davis, Stephen Fulton, Devin Haney, even Noah Inoue this morning. What are your thoughts on these guys, what they've delivered, and this new wave of fighters coming up in the sport?
I think it's good. I think that what's funny about it is, if you look at the history of boxing, like the smaller guys, they never really got that thing because they were so small, I think. But right now, it's like the smaller guys are really ruling boxing. You got the lightweight division is amazing, and all those guys, and even the one, Stephen Fulton, like 126 or something like that. He's
122, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 122. Like the smaller guys are really getting it, and then like the welterweights and the 154s are really making more noise than all the big guys these days. So I think that it's amazing to see and Stephen Fulton is a very talented young fighter, and obviously has a great trainer who's helping him and who has helped develop him. So he's been looking great.
Yeah. Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, which is interesting, obviously you fought yourself professionally, and what are your attributes? One of the things I saw someone pointing out about you is how tough you were as a fighter, how tenacious you were as a fighter. And then I look at the fighters that you train, Jermell and Errol, for instance, and they seem to have that same kind of toughness in the ring. Is that something you instill in them? And if so, how do you do it? Like, how does it translate?
I think that they have it, but I think that with the strategy and the skill set that I teach brings out even more. I mean, so it makes them to where they can be more aggressive, and because they believe in it. So I believe that they have it already. You just gotta tap into their toughness and tap into the mental toughness, and just keep pushing them because they know that it's 102 degrees today in the gym. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they're pushing through these adversities.
Yeah.
There's nothing in the ring that night would compare to sparring or working in 102 degree weather It's like, so it's totally different. You know what I mean? So it's like, for them, all the toughness comes from all this adversity and just hard heat-filled training and everything that they put themselves through. I'm always reminding them as well.
Last question for you, Derrick. So many great fighters, and you might be biased on this one, but we wanted to get your opinion on this. In your opinion, who is the best fighter in the world, pound for pound, today?
I think that Errol Spence is the pound for pound number one fighter in the world. Because, and the reason why I say that is because it can't be Canelo Alvarez. It can't be, because the idea is a mythological idea to say that he could move up to any weight and be successful. Well, he moved up to light heavyweight and he was unsuccessful. So that means that it's over, right? They're saying because the skill set and as good as these fighters are, they can move up to any weight and be successful. And from what we know now, he can't move up to any weight and be successful because he wasn't. So I think it's Errol. I think it's Errol. With a skill set. I was talking to the guys in the gym today, and it was like, you can say that who does he most remind you of as a fighter? And I was like, well, I think it's two guys. I think it's enterprise, tenacity, right? It's conditioning, throw punches so hard and nonstop, but at the same time, it's Sugar Ray Leonard, the skill set. So I think it's a mixture of the two. Is who he really is. Oh,
that's something. That's quite a combo, huh? Yeah. Well, I really hope we get to see the big fight in the fall. Derrick, as always, thank you for taking the time to join us. All the best to you. Hopefully, Frank gets his fight rescheduled and we see you back in the corner real soon.
Thank you. I appreciate it, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, it's time for Mike and I to go toe-to-toe, and this week we've got a good one. We're going to unveil our top 10 pound-for-pound best fighters in the world today list, the both of us, separate lists, of course, in ascending order. So, Mike, I'll let you kick it off.
Okay, I wanted to preface this, make this as quick as possible, just so you sort of understand what my method is. I think one of the interesting things about, or I don't know how interesting it is, one thing about pound for pound lists is everybody kind of has their different ways of approaching it. And we've discussed that off and on over the past couple of years, but I wanted to lay that out. So in my case, I think you put a little bit more emphasis than I do on resume for pound. What I do is I just kind of look at a fighter's resume. I kind of stand back and I look at it and I ask myself, has he done enough against good opposition for me to make a determination as to how good this guy is? That's sort of my criteria, and it's evolved over the years, to be honest with you. I actually used to use resume more than I do now. Anyway, so that's kind of how I look at it. Just who's better regardless of, and then the definition of pound for pound is just who's better regardless of weight. So there you go. That's kind of how I approach it. My number 10 is Jermell Charlo. Charlo, first of all, is my kind of boxer. He's a guy who can box, but isn't satisfied to outpoint you or eke out a victory. He wants to knock your head off. That's who he is. He's a nasty guy inside those ropes. And he has the punching power to pull it off, as we've seen so many times. I also wanted to mention something else. You don't want to fight Jermell Charlo a second time. As Tony Harrison and Brian Castano might tell you, to say he makes the right adjustments both strategically and in terms of motivation is an understatement. He's one half of arguably the greatest brother combination in the history of boxing.
Yeah, no question. And I'm very disappointed he's so low on your list, but I'll get to him in a little bit. Before I jump into my number 10, just to give you some background on my criteria, I do place resume above all things. It's not the only thing, but I place it significantly above all things. If I was just going by the eyeball test or how I think you got, someone will pair up with the other, I'd probably have Jaron Ennis on here because he beats a lot of guys, in my opinion. But you got to see it. I got to see you do it before I put you up here. Now, I struggled with my number 10, namely because of the excellent work Devin Haney and Shakur Stevenson have done over the past few weeks. These are, in my opinion, two very impressive fighters who I believe will be in the top 5 pound for pound sooner rather than later. But for some reason, Jermell Charlo gets overlooked. This is a man who has been a pro for 13, 14 years or so, is undefeated, He's won world titles in 2 divisions. At 154, he beat an unbeaten Julian Williams. He knocked him out in an elite fashion, and a former champion in Austin Trout when Trout was actually still formidable. His only losses back then were to Canelo and Erislandy Lara. And, Charlo at 160, he's got the wins over Dennis Hogan, Sergey Derenchenko, Matt Karloff, Brandon Adams. I could, go on. Are these standout A-class fighters? No. Charlo hasn't had that opportunity yet, but these are solid top contenders. Again, an undefeated 2-division world champion who was set to make the 5th defense of his WBC middleweight title. Jermall Charlo is my number 10.
Okay, before I respond to your choice, I just wanted to clarify something. I do consider resume, and I thought the Jaron Ennis example that you gave was perfect. If I just went by the eyeball test, if that was the only thing,
he'd be up there.
He'd probably be in my top 3 right now, right? so no, you do have to prove it. Again, I just sort of look at the whole. I scan the whole thing.
Yeah,
and I say,
I get it.
You understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
As far as Jermall, first of all, Jermall's in my top 15, so he's right there. Anyway, yeah. I love Jermall Charlo. I think he's just, when I think of him, I just think of superb all-around fighter and just incredibly consistent. He's just really good every time he steps into the ring. He's another guy, I would just call him a winner. Obviously hasn't lost, he's a winner, but he's a guy who finds ways to win fights. So yeah, I love Jermall Charlo.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to number 9. I will kick this one off. My number 9 is a future Hall of Famer, a living legend, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. This is a 4-division world champion who is still going strong at 34. And let me tell you, in those weight classes, 34 is like 44. So Gonzalez is an anomaly. I thought he beat Juan Francisco Estrada in March 2021. That's why he's on my list, and Estrada is not. Estrada is another great fighter who I believe is a future Hall of Famer. We saw what Gonzalez did to Julio Cesar Martinez, Kal Yafai. If not for his successive losses to Rungvisai, he'd be much higher on my list. Look, Roman Gonzalez is someone I've been watching since 2012 when he first fought Estrada back then, and I was always so impressed by him. To think he's still going strong is just amazing.
Yeah, that's interesting positioning for Roman Gonzalez, because my number 9 is Juan Francisco Estrada. So, you know what? I almost feel bad about this, because what Roman Gonzalez has done, especially after those losses to Rungvisai, is just incredible. It really is. I guess Estrada for some people might seem like an obscure choice, but this guy has fought at the highest level of the sport for a long, long time. Just take a look at his resume. He's got a really good resume, and he's coming off a victory in his rematch with Gonzalez. Although the decision, as you said, was sort of controversial. It wasn't sort of; it was controversial. I actually scored it a draw, so I think it was an even fight. So I'm going to give Estrada the benefit of the doubt in that fight. Estrada's just a fighting machine. He could box, he could punch, he has it all. And he's proved it just over and over again over the past decade. So I love this guy, but I also love Roman Gonzalez. 2 great little fighters.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember when I was writing for Boxing News at the time, I think back in 2013 or so, I'd written that Roman Gonzalez was the most underrated fighter on the planet. Then he was on HBO a couple of years later. It sort of blew up. And then I remember writing, okay, Juan Francisco Estrada is the most underrated fighter on the planet. And then, of course, he gained notoriety. These are 2 special fighters, and I'm glad that they've been recognized. Who's your number 8?
Okay, you're gonna love this one, and this is actually one of the reasons that I wanted to preface this whole thing the way I did. Once again, your favorite fighter, I guess that's who he's become in my eyes.
Oh, Lord.
Kenneth Buhari's favorite fighter, Vasily Lomachenko.
What is he doing here? All right, go on.
Right. I know you don't think he belongs here, as you just indicated. You keep asking, who has he beaten? You say he just lost decisively to Teofimo Lopez. And honestly, I hear you when you say that. I just look at him differently from you. In my opinion, his overall level of opposition has been high enough to demonstrate that he's an absolute boxing wizard. And I don't use that word to describe anybody else. I think he's an absolute boxing wizard. And until I see otherwise, that's what I'm going to continue to call him. And like Canelo against Bivol, I'm not willing to write him off because of one setback. I believe he still has it. One thing we agree on, I hope he lands in the ring with Tank Davis. Then we'll know for sure.
For his sake, I hope he doesn't. But, the thing is that for a long time we've heard this, that, his resume, I don't even see that, he beat Gary Russell Jr. when Gary Russell was nothing more than just a prospect. Ring Magazine did not even have him rated in the top 10 when Lomachenko beat him. Yeah, so it's not, to me, more important than who is when. I mean, William Joppy has a claim to a win over Roberto Duran, but I don't rate it, in the same way I rate other wins over Roberto Duran. So and then I look at the other names on the list: Nicholas Walters, okay, Miguel Mariaga, all right, it's decent. Look, you have him on your pound for pound list. We've gone back and forth about this guy a million times, so I'm not going to go back and forth on it. He certainly is an excellent fighter, and I take nothing away from him. And like you, I hope that he gets a shot against Gervonta Tank Davis. I hope he gets that fight, and I assume we won't have to hear about him much longer if he does.
Maybe not.
Maybe not. My number 8 is Cool Boy Stephen Fulton Jr. I don't know how anyone could watch Fulton do his thing last week and not think this is one of the 10 best fighters in the world. Honestly, he could be even higher on this list, but not yet on mine. He's still got some work to do, and I believe he will do it. I mean, this guy is clearing out an extremely competitive division, the super bantamweight weight class, and I hope he gets a shot at the final 2 belts to show that he is indeed the man.
Well, as I said after Fulton's victory, or I said earlier in this podcast, I mean, Fulton is a special fighter. There's no question about it. He's definitely top 10 talent. And I thought about him, about putting him in the top 10, but I guess I kept thinking about the Figueroa fight. I kept thinking, he barely eked out a victory just 2 fights ago. Maybe I'm leaning a little bit towards resume there, what happened in the previous fight. But listen, the guy's got top 10 talent. I mean, there's no question in my mind. I think for him, it's just a matter of time. Another thing about pound for pound for me is that it's sort of a process. I mean, you don't want to jump the gun necessarily. I mean, I try to be careful with that. I'll give you a real quick example. Like when Adrian Broner was hot for a while, like everybody suddenly had them in their pound for pound list, and then he just, imploded. And then everybody's kind of like, well, maybe he wasn't quite as good as we thought he was, that kind of thing. So you got to be careful. And I've been guilty of it. I've done it with guys. I put guys too high, and I'm like, oh crap. Yeah, that was a mistake. And then you sort of have to try to find ways to step that back. So yeah.
I don't knock him for the fight against Figueroa. Figueroa had knocked out an undefeated 2 division champion in Luis Nery in the fight prior. A lot of people were picking him to beat. A lot of people were picking him to beat Stephen Fulton, and I figured it was going to be a war and a close fight. I think that's what I said on this podcast, and so I don't really ding him for that. But hey, he's still got more to do. I think we're in agreement there. Who do you got for number 8?
7.
Sorry.
Okay, so this is I love having him here because of what I've been saying for so long. Number 7 for me is Canelo Alvarez. I've always thought that.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Go on.
I think we already talked about that.
We did.
I'm happy to go and do it again.
Please.
I've always thought that he's somewhat overrated, but I've also said that he's one of the best fighters of his generation. And I'm certainly not ready to write him off after one setback, just like the Lomachenko thing I mentioned. Even a bad setback like the one against Dmitry Bivol. The guy's only 31 years old. He's still the excellent, experienced all-around fighter who's beaten a long list of elite opponents. He probably has as good a resume as anybody in boxing. He's still the top 168-pounder, although I'd like to see him face David Benavidez. And he's still a top 10 pound-for-pound guy. So he's still one of the very best fighters in the world, maybe just not as high as he was before.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think he's starting to slow down?
That's a really good question. I haven't really thought about that too much. My gut reaction to that is no. I think if anything, maybe he's gone up in weight too fast or something along those lines. He looks too bulky to me. And then he tangled with the wrong guy in Bivol. I mean, Bivol not only was naturally bigger guy, but he was also a really talented, experienced, bigger guy. I don't know. We'll see it. If he fights a guy, well, he's going to fight Golovkin. Let's see how he looks. Now, I assume he's going to win that fight. Let's see how he looks. Maybe he fights a guy like Benavidez. Then we'll really know. I don't know. He seems like a guy to me who takes care of himself in between fights. I just wonder about the bulk, moving up in weight. And then I've always thought he had limitations. And again, maybe they just picked the wrong guy to fight.
Yeah, maybe, and I will get to him shortly. My number 7 is Gervonta Tank Davis, a 5-time 3 division world champion who has stopped all but 2 of his opponents. Folks say, what champion? He's a regular champion. Yeah, well, you weren't saying that crap when Gennady Golovkin held a regular title for like 15 title defenses. So let's cut that out. And that's no disrespect to the great Golovkin, by the way, but some of y'all need to stop disrespecting Tank Davis. A win over Jose Pedraza, the only man to stop Pedraza, and he did it when Pedraza was an undefeated world champion. Isaac Cruz, Mario Barrios, which is a hell of a win. And did I mention future Hall of Famer Leo Santa Cruz? It's excellent resume. Then you look at his skills. He can box. He's got a high ring IQ. He knows how to make adjustments. He's got great footwork, pivoting. He's got power in both fists. He's got great athleticism, quickness, speed. Tank Davis is the real deal. I wouldn't argue with anyone who had him higher on this list.
Yeah, I'll agree with everything that you said except for the great resume part. It's a good resume, but it's not a great resume.
That's fair.
That's going to happen though as we move forward, because people forget the guy's still a young guy. I mean, very specifically, he's number 11 on my list, and the reason he's number, well, let me say this first. As I've said on the podcast, I think more than once, the 2 guys I see as future candidates to be number 1 pound for pound are Jaron Ennis and Gervonta Davis, possibly Shakur Stevenson thrown in there too. I think one of those 3 guys is going to end up being number 1. But this is part of the process thing for me. I think Davis is rising pretty quickly, but I don't want to jump the gun. I don't want to put him too high too soon. But I think he has not only top 10 pound for pound potential. I think he's got number 1 pound for pound potential.
I agree with that.
The dude's got it all. He just has it all. I mean, he does things extremely well that people don't even talk about.
Yeah, I can't think of too many 130 pounders, who can go up to 140 and beat a guy like Barrios, like he did currently. I can't think of any 135 pounders who can do it. But lest we forget, he went from 130 to 140. I think his resume is underrated, but certainly there's always room for more, and I think he wants those big fights. He's calling for those big fights, and I'm hoping he lands one. Next, let's go on to number 6. You spoke about him. My number 6 is Canelo Alvarez, and folks are probably going to look at our list and be like, why did Canelo fall so much? I think you outlined very well the reasons why you have him at number 7. For me, when folks are like, he should still be top 3 or top 4, he moved up in weight and was daring, to be great. I say, look, boxers dare to be great every time they step in the ring. So let's not denigrate anyone else. Second, it's not like he hadn't been in that weight class before. And third, he had already picked out his next 29 fights. So clearly he didn't see Bivol as some super duper threat. But it's what occurred in the ring that made me drop Canelo lower than I typically would. I thought he fought in a very one-dimensional way. And when it looked like he was well behind, instead of going for broke, he just sort of accepted it. Now, look, I'm not a boxer. I've never been in there. So, I can't really speak to what was going on. But, from my unexpert opinion, with everything on the line, I guess I expected more from him. Nevertheless, Canelo is still one of the very best today, and his resume is impeccable. He's my number 6.
Yeah, I think so. We're only 1 apart. I think you can argue the guy is top 3 or 4 still. I just don't happen to think that he is. I think in the Bivol fight, I've seen the other guys do this too. I think halfway through the fight, he's just thinking, "There's nothing I could do. I just can't win this fight." I mean, he'll keep trying and keep throwing bombs, this and that, and to some degree. But I think at some point, guys just kind of know. They kind of like, I can't win this fight. I don't have the game plan. I didn't prepare for this. I just don't have it. So it happens to the best of them. So number 6. So number 6. My number 6 is the guy that did that to Canelo Alvarez, Dimitri Bivol. I'm not basing this solely on Bivol's dominating victory over the then consensus number 1 Canelo Alvarez, although that certainly was the factor that catapulted him into the top 10. He had a strong resume going into that fight, having beaten a series of top light heavyweights over the past half decade or so. He isn't a guy that came up really, in boxing circles. He didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, people maybe didn't really know much about him, but he didn't come out of nowhere. He has a good resume. I think everyone saw in the fight against Canelo that he's an unusually good, intelligent boxer. People never imagined anyone could do that to Canelo. Aside from what Mayweather did to him, those many years ago, it was shocking. But I think it's a testament to how good Bivol is. He's a really good fighter.
Yeah, he seriously impressed me in that fight, and he's in my top 15. I still want to see him against Artur Beterbiev, the winner of Artur Beterbiev, Joe Smith, and I think the winner of that will likely enter my top 10 depending on how they win. But I was so impressed by what he did, and he never seemed to leave his first or second gear against Canelo. He just basically did that with the jab and an occasional right hand. Obviously, great footwork and a great game plan as well. So I'm in agreement with you there. Let's go to number 5. I'll kick this one off. My number 5 is Errol Spence Jr. This guy is the man in the best division in the sport, the undefeated WBA, WBC, IBF World Welterweight Champion. Jeez, that win over your Dennis Ugas in April was just scary. Elite stuff. It's the man who went to the UK to take Kell Brook's title away, and he hasn't stopped since. Wins over Mikey Garcia, Sean Porter, Danny Garcia, Lamont Peterson, and he's done it in a variety of ways, which is so impressive. Errol Spence, the big fish. It's a bad man, no man test, as he would say, and I can't wait to see what's next for him.
Yeah, I agree with what you said about Spence, which is why he's on my list, but a little bit higher. So
okay.
I will talk
get
about
to him later.
In about a minute. Yeah. So,
okay.
So my number 5 was difficult for me because I never quite know where to put heavyweights. I don't pound for pound, I don't think really was invented for heavyweights, but I think you have to be fair, I think you have to consider them when you think about the best all around fighters. So anyway, number 5 for me, I landed on Tyson Fury. Again, tricky for me because he's a heavyweight, but I honestly believe he deserves to be in the top 10 based on his ability alone. Set aside his size and his personality, big personality for a second. The guy can really box. He can punch when he has to, as he showed against Deontay Wilder. And he's a tough guy. I still don't know how he got up from those knockdowns against Wilder. I mean, nobody gets up from those knockdowns. I just thought that this guy deserves the recognition that he gets. But I understand people are critical of that. Some people don't think heavyweights belong, but I happen to think this guy does.
You know what? I won't knock you for that because he's such a skilled fighter. Although I actually think Deontay Wilder is better suited for a pound list than Tyson Fury. I guess the reason why, and we may have discussed this before, is because when I think of pound for pound, I also try to think like all things being equal, and he has such a ridiculous size advantage over everyone else that I think to myself, well, if he shrunk everyone to the same size, would Tyson Fury be that good? No. But, the flip side is that he's an anomaly. It's not just that he's 6'9", 280. He's 6'9", 280 and moves like he's 160. He's quick in there. He's got, the hand speed of a middleweight. Great footwork, great ring IQ. So I have no qualms about putting Tyson Fury on a pound for pound list. I guess, like I said, that all things being equal thing is kind of why I wouldn't put him on there. But again, I get it. I mean, you look at him and he's something special. He really could be an all-time great heavyweight.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point that you brought up about Wilder. Because imagine how Wilder would be perceived if he had been fighting as a cruiserweight all this time.
Right.
People would be talking about him as maybe one of the best fighters of all time.
Yeah,
as it is, he's one of the biggest punchers of all time and a heavyweight, one of the better heavyweights of his era. But that's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So
let's go to number 4. Why don't you kick this one off?
Okay, so number 4 for me is the aforementioned Errol Spence Jr. When I think of Spence, I think of a winner. He has the natural tools, the experience, the determination to beat his opponents no matter what it takes. He's that kind of guy. He outboxed the boxer in Mikey Garcia. He outslugged the slugger in Sean Porter, and he's done it over and over again against high-level opposition for quite a long time now. That's why he's here on my list. And obviously, if he ends up fighting and beating Terrence Crawford, then he gets a lot closer to the top of the mountain. This guy's a great fighter.
Yeah, I say if they fight, that the winner is probably number 1. And speaking of Terrence Crawford, he's my number 4. An undefeated 3-division champion. He's coming off, in my opinion, a career best win in stopping Sean Porter. Plus, at welterweight, he impressively stopped Jeff Horn back in 2017. And then you look at 140. Well, he was undisputed there. He won a title at 135. You look at the list of guys he's beaten, and there's some damn good fighters on that list. Not necessarily the most elite, but to consistently dominate the fighters he's fought in the manner that he has is very impressive. Now, can he beat the big fish? Can he handle the top dog at 147? That I don't know, but we need to see it.
Thank you. You just made a really good case for my guy, who's a little bit higher okay. on my list. So I'll discuss him in a minute. So we're at number 3 now, right?
Go for it.
Okay, my number 3 is Oleksandr Usyk. Usyk's skill set.
Interesting.
Usyk's skill set is special. You know, he was undisputed champion at cruiserweight. I think it's a stretch. I personally think it's a stretch to say he was as good as Evander Holyfield, one of my idols, but he certainly was one of the best 200-pounders of all time. And look what he did against a much bigger guy in Anthony Joshua at heavyweight. That performance made it clear, at least to me, that this guy's ability, his ring acumen, is just off the charts. I don't know whether he can do it again against Joshua, but he's already become sort of a legend as it is right now.
Yeah, he has, and I will get to him in a little bit. My number 3 is Jermell Charlo, the undisputed super welterweight champion. I think to have all 4 belts in a division as competitive as 154 has been over the years speaks volumes, and this man has been doing it for a very, very long time. He is conquering different eras at this stage. He beat Gabe Rosado 8 years ago. I mean, you look at the list of fighters he faced coming up before he won a world title, and that resume alone is impressive. Vanes Martirosyan, Francisco Santana, Dennis Duggan. These were tough outs for an up-and-comer. And then you look at who he's beaten since. Tony Harrison, Austin Trout, Erickson Lubin, Jason Rosario, and then he saves his best for the biggest moment of his career, handing Brian Castano his first loss to become the king of 154. This is a surefire future Hall of Famer who has never ducked a challenge, never shrank in the ring. He's the quintessential boxer puncher. I mean, every time I watch Jermell Charlo fight, I feel like I'm in a time machine, like I've been thrown back to the 90s because he's sort of a throwback fighter. And don't be surprised if he starts clearing out the next generation of top 154 pounders. I'm talking about guys like Fundura and Zhu and so forth. In short, give this man his flowers now. My number 3, no question, Jermell Charlo.
Yeah, all that is why he's one of my favorite fighters. Love watching. To me, as a fan, that's the most important thing. I just love watching Jermell Charlo fight. You know, he would probably be higher on my list if he didn't have the 2 slip-ups. If, for lack of a better way to describe them, the loss to
Lomachenko. Excuse me. I'm sorry. What were you saying?
Right. Well, he's still in my top 10. So I mean, yeah. So he's had 2 slip-ups and he's still in my top 10. But I think he'd be higher though. If he hadn't lost to Harrison and he hadn't drawn with Castano, that makes me wonder, because he beat him so convincingly in the second fights, in the rematches, that made me wonder, why did he lose to him in the first fights? It's almost like he needs to.
Are you talking about Harrison?
I'm sorry,
or Castano?
Harrison and Drew with Harrison, and Drew with Castano in the first fight. It's like, why didn't he win those fights? It's like he needed that extra.
Well, a lot of people thought he did win those fights.
Right.
But
the second fights he left, no doubt. So I'm just wondering, could he have done that in the first fight? That's all I'm saying. At any rate, he would be higher on my list if he had no losses and no draws. But as it is, he's number 10 and rising quickly. So I love this guy.
Who you got? What's next for you? Is it number 2 or?
Number 2 for me. You want me to go for it?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So after what we saw this morning, I had to really think long and hard about this, which is really saying something considering how I feel about Terrence Crawford. But my number 2 is Naoya Inoue. A part of me has thought for a long time, and I've said this on the podcast, that Inoue is the best in the business. This morning's result against Nonito Donaire just sort of reinforced that. That was just scary stuff, absolutely scary stuff. I don't see a weakness in this guy. I really don't think there's a better combination of natural gifts. He's just super fast. His skill set and then his punching power among active fighters today. If there's a problem, is that there's really nobody at 118 who could hang with him. Maybe he'll have to move up to 126. And the guy I thought it was Stephen Fulton. Wouldn't that be a fight?
Yeah, that would. Well, it's Fulton's at 122.
Oh, what am I
So
talking
yeah,
about? I'm sorry.
yeah.
I'm sorry. I said 126. I meant 122.
122, yeah, that would be an incredible fight. I'm gonna touch on that man in a second.
Okay.
My number two is Alexander Usyk, the undefeated unified heavyweight champion. Uh, this was a guy who was undisputed at cruiserweight, and like you said, to me, there's Holyfield, and then there's Usyk. That's saying something. I mean, that's rare air right there in terms of cruiserweights. Then he moves up to heavyweight, puts on a master class against a significantly bigger Anthony Joshua. This guy's just exquisite in the ring. His IQ in there is off the charts. He has excellent movement, deceptive power. He's got top tier athleticism, and he's got a confidence born from years of experience. I don't know if he wins the rematch against Joshua. I think folks are counting out Joshua too soon, but in my opinion, Usyk's already a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, he's really a special fighter.
Yeah.
And I look forward to see what happens in that fight. And maybe the winner of that fights Fury, and we have some interesting heavyweight fights coming up.
Yeah, for sure. Let's go to number one. I'll kick off my number one.
I think I know who it is.
Yeah, you've already spoken on him, so he kind of sealed it for me Tuesday morning when he flattened Nonito Donaire in 2 rounds. Was I expecting a different result in the rematch? No, but I wasn't expecting him to do Donaire like that. This is an unbeaten 3-division champ, but it's what he's done in this 3rd division that stands out. Juan Carlos Payano, Emmanuel Rodriguez, the aforementioned Donaire, Maloney, McDonald. Then you look at the skills, the hand speed, the power, the ring smarts, the jab, the body punching, everything. He has it all. And you alluded to this. He's conquered 118. There's nothing there for him. So let's let him reach for new heights and attempt to establish himself as an all-time great and move to 122. And let's see him face the best there.
Yeah, the only thing that scares me is that I wouldn't want Inoue to go too high, because I think it's sometimes these little guys, when they go too high, they lose something. But he certainly hasn't lost anything.
I don't think.
At
118, right?
Yeah.
And the way his power is, I don't think even if he loses a little bit, it's like Roy Jones at 175. You still don't want to get hit by him.
Right. I don't want. I'm not playing Monday morning quarterback. I mean, I had said, I think we had talked about this in private. And I was really fearful for Donaire. I think that at least part of the reason that Donaire did so well in that first fight was because Inoue was fighting with a broken face. And I know that Donaire broke his face, but it's hard to fight with a broken face. A lot of guys just stop and they can't do it. But Inoue just pushed through it and he won the fight. So I thought a healthy Inoue and a guy and Donaire pushing 40 as like a formula for disaster for Donaire, and that's sort of what we saw. But that doesn't take anything away from what Inoue displayed. I mean, the dude is just absolutely nuts. And I think there's a strong argument to make him number one, which is why I really considered doing that for the first time in a long time. But I landed on Crawford.
But
he's been my number one guy all along, even when Canelo was the consensus number one. I stuck with Crawford. He also can do it all, like Inoue, and I love his fighting spirit, his nasty streak, just love it. I think Sean Porter made a big statement when he said, quote, he's the best, out of everybody I've been in the ring with, because Porter has fought a lot of really elite guys, a lot of really good fighters, and he knows what he's talking about. My only concern about Crawford now is his age. He's 34. I think he's a young 34, but we'll know for sure when and if he ends up fighting Errol Spence Jr. in the fall. Fingers crossed that fight happens, because it's going to, first of all, just be an absolutely fabulous event, and second, it would answer a lot of questions.
Absolutely, and I think whoever wins that, to me, is the best fighter in the world. And they both have such mean streaks that it just can't be a bad fight. I mean, I think the outcome is going to be exciting. I'd be shocked if it went 12 rounds. I just, I got a great feeling about that fight. So, like you, I hope it happens. And I hope you guys enjoyed our pound for pound list. Looking forward to your feedback, of course. And that will do it for this week's show. We want to thank Derrick James for stopping by and joining us. And we want to thank you guys for doing so as well. Be sure to check us out next week for more boxing talk, more interviews right here on the PBC podcast.